This is the Working in Hell podcast with your host, Vinny Blasio. Each episode, Vinny takes you inside the world of New York State corrections, focusing on both corrections officer and law enforcement issues. And now your host, Vinny Blasio.
Hey everyone, my name is Vinny Blasio and welcome to another edition. This is episode 19 of the Working in Hell podcast. If you do like the podcast, just click below and make sure you hit that thumbs up button and please share with others if you're so inclined. So today we're going to continue where we left off on last episode, and we kind of stayed out of the fray for a week to let things progress in the New York State Department of Corrections fiasco, and now we're into over day 2021 into the correction officers strike. So, and we'll show a little clip of how things are going, and we'll get into the events and different things that are going on. And obviously, we talked last week of the timeline and how we got to where we were and where we're at today. And since then, there's been a lot of different activities that have taken place. There's also been many different entities, different lawyers that have made statements, got involved, filed lawsuits. The union did a press conference after a little lull that members took things into their own hands. And obviously, they took things into their own hands right from the get-go to get to where we are today with the Wildcat strike. So let's get into the very first short little clip just to take back from the rally that happened on Tuesday.
Hold the line! 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 Hold the line!
And look at those vast crowds. For those that are listening on audio, there's going to be a couple different videos that you're not going to be able to see, but you can kind of get a visualization of what's going on. But that strike, or the strike rally that was held in Albany on Tuesday morning, that was really well attended. There was a lot of people. Obviously, there was different people from the media, different people from the legislature, different people from even outside of New York that became involved. You had Michael Sussman, I believe, who was the organizer or the MC. I don't know if he had direct organizing of the event, but he was the MC of the event. And the number of speakers was just sensational. And the crowd was just amazing. But then you kind of caveat from that point in time on Tuesday. And then as the week went by, it was a blip on the radar, and it just seemed that everything had changed from Tuesday. Great rally, great attendance, great speakers, a lot going on, a lot of enthusiasm. And then we get to the media narrative anyway, not with the strikers themselves. It just was a blip on the screen, and then that narrative has kind of gone away. And, you know, the whole reason that these individuals took it upon themselves to even go to the position of this wildcat strike, we'll call it. We're going to watch another incident here. And this gives you an idea, especially to the general public, of how we got to where we are. And this is an everyday occurrence. Unfortunately, I'm going to give a warning before I put this up. Please know that this is very violent, this is very graphic, and you're going to see some things that you're not going to like. So if that's you, then please turn away from the screen. If you're listening on audio podcast, again, I apologize. But this video is very intense, but it brings to the surface of exactly what's happening, the frustration that the correction officers are feeling, and what they're trying to convey to the general public and to the New York legislator, to the New York governor, and to the New York commissioner of docks, who they have stated over and over again that they've lost faith in. But let's just watch this video, if we will. So there you have it, folks. A live event inmates overpowering the officers. One officer is trying to stop another one from intervening. You see what's on the ground. You see blood and what have you. Everything scattered to the floor. The officer is obviously badly injured. The other officer is laying in the corner, obviously injured as well. So, I mean, this just gives you a quick synopsis of this is what they're talking about. And as I talked last week, and I've talked to so many media people and different people in the public, and they really, from last week's podcast, said we had no idea that inmates weren't in cells all the time, that there's medium facilities that they're actually in cubicles. And that's a point that I want to reiterate this week, is that, yeah, the public doesn't get to understand that. They don't see it. And the people that make these laws, as we said last podcast, that are in support of HALT should be forced to work at least one day, so they see exactly how the crazy laws that they passed are actually effectuated in reality, because we all know that it doesn't work. And we'll go back to the fact sheet. Here it is, last week's or last month's. So this was February 1st. You see 2020, the assaults on staff, 2,070 assaults inmate on inmate, or 2,982. You see the stats for 2025. The assaults on staff, 160. Assaults on incarcerated individuals, 249. Now I'm going to go back from that sheet, and we're going to go and look at what docs, and this is docs. This isn't the podcast. We are going to take a look at the March 1st. Here we go. And we're going to look at that. Now we see, 2,069. So that was changed. I think that wasn't at 2,070. So assaults on staff, one went down somehow, but I'll double check that. And then 2,979 for all of 2024. So even if I'm off by one, you see that from 2025, it's up to assault on staff to 320. And then you see assaults on incarcerated individuals, inmate is 416. So you see that. You see the change from last month. And I just want to bring that up again. So let's remove that and go back to last month's. Yeah, so we've lost one. They must have deemed that it was not a assault on staff, because no, there it is. So it was we lost one because it was 2,070 and 2,982. And then you see the comparison how month to month. So, and I do keep these. Docs does have this on the website, but I believe they delete that month when they put up another monthly report. So to remove that from the stage. So as you can see, we're still talking at a high assault level. You just saw the video, and hopefully those officers are well healed by now, for lack of a better word. But this strike that's ongoing today, the message cannot be lost about that. It's not monetary, it's everything to do with officer safety. And that narrative was really hitting home for a long stretch. Now it seems like that narrative has lost. There's been many things in the media. We're going into the New York State budget. So the budget, the Medicaid was just announced. Empire Report, I believe, called it a charade that the governor is saying. So the Medicaid and how that plays with the federal government to the state, and getting in all that, and how New York State is 82% above the national average for Medicaid. But be that as it may, that's been dominating the news. And as we're talking about being 82% of the national average, let's go to their other sheet that we put up every podcast, and we'll add this. And this is the Marticello dynasty of the See-Through New York. And you can see all the Marticellos that are leading an organization that is just in complete chaos. And I think I read it this morning. I can't remember who quoted it, so I can't give kudos to those and credit to those that came up. But you can't expect leading a circus without there being the leader as a clown. So, and I think that's when you look at the Marticello dynasty, you can see that that's attributes to a part of the problem, and that's, I don't think in the short term has gone away. So, where have we come from, and where are we going? So we look at this quote, and this is directly taking off of X. And I'll add this, and that's a direct quote right here from Kathy Hochul, and that was posted by CBS 6, and there was a story that obviously went with it. But the direct quote from her from that rally that I just posted the video of, that was well attended on Tuesday, great rally. And then CBS 6 has her quote as being, Governor Kathy Hochul says correction officers rally out of the Capitol building Tuesday are in violation of the law. Well, between violation of the law, it's an illegal strike. Have we really heard anything other than that from the mouth of babes? I haven't heard it. I haven't heard her saying that we're working on a solution. I've heard her say that, you know, she respects correction officers, and her solution was her executive order with the National Guard. And I don't believe that that's playing out well either. As last week, I believe, and I don't want to give out certain names, but this was unique, and I found this very interesting that there was an OMH crisis was sent out to the facilities to de-stress the National Guard. Now think about that. And I'm not saying that they're not stressed out. They shouldn't be in the position that they're in. The governor put them in there, and I'm sure they are stressed. I mean, we have 19, 20-year-old and up people that are serving some of the roles of correction officers, and I do believe that they're stressed. But the governor sends in stress management and stress crisis teams for the National Guard. What do you think the correction officer goes through every single day? And now that outside entities are getting a taste of it, and different people are, you know, I believe it was parole officers put out on their PEF website about, you know, how they're burned out because they're working 24 hours and they're working 7 days a week without a week off, and rightfully so. But isn't that what's been going on with the correction officers for years now? Haven't they been suffering that? But when it happens to somebody else, now, you know, people are like, wow, this is really going on. And that's what the strike is all about. And that's really the what needs to be hammered home to people and then the general public, is that the working conditions become so bad and so deplorable, and nobody, I mean nobody, has gone on to address it. I've seen in hearings, and now the New York State legislator and some of the minority and majority have reached out and talked to the Department of Labor and said, you know, what are you doing? And I'm not saying that the Department of Labor is at fault or not. That's not my place. But PESH has been involved. They've been called to different facilities over and over again because of the chemical substances that these people are ingesting or in contact with, whatever it may be. They're going out in ambulances and they're saying, we want to go home safe. You know, last week's podcast, I spent a great deal of time, so I'm not going to get into a lot of that. But now it's happening to the National Guard, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that exactly. But one of the things I want to jump right into is Ralph Larigo, who is the conservative chair in Western New York and the Conservative Party, but he's an attorney. And he also did a show on March 7th on the David Bellavia show at WBEN in Buffalo. So on his radio show, David and Ralph Larigo talk about the correction strike, and Ralph has gone on, Mr. Larigo has gone on to represent several hundred of correction officers. And there's a hearing that's coming up on Tuesday. So I just want to be able to, let me just check the date on that. So we're looking at March 11th. So March 11th in Buffalo, Mr. Larigo has asked that every correction officer that can attend this hearing, please attend. And that's going to be Tuesday at the courthouse at 11 a.m. And that's going to be in part one in the ceremonial courthouse, which is on the second floor. And the address of that is 92 Franklin Street in the city of Buffalo. So again, it's the ceremonial courthouse that's on the second floor, part one at 92 Franklin Street on this coming Tuesday. And that court proceeding begins at 11 a.m. So he has asked everyone to attend that. So Mr. Larigo went on with Mr. Bellavia and talked for quite a time. And I would like everyone to go to WBEN's website and actually listen to that 20-minute conversation that the two of them had, and listen into the different things that they talked about, not only about the upcoming court hearing, but and the proceedings, but it also talks about the deplorable conditions, how we got to where we are, to where nobody has listened. We got to that last podcast. So if you want to watch that, again, you can catch up and get a lot of reasons why. But now we're into this strike, hopefully coming to an end, as anybody's guess. But we've been in it for over 3 weeks now. So, and Mr. Bellavia and Mr. Larigo, and they talk about what was just put in the Buffalo Evening News into, I believe it was Another Voice section of the Buffalo News, where Professor John Violante talks about the stress of law enforcement, and particularly correction officers, and what it does to them. And Mr. Larigo goes on and makes, I'll just rough up a couple points here, but that also I suggest is a good read for anybody that wants to look at Mr. John Violante, PhD's stress report. But he talks about how the life of a correction officer is vastly shortened. It is 16 years lower than the national average. So think about that. Just being in the profession of corrections, and that has been the case even before these deplorable conditions. So I would venture to guess, common sense would say that lifespan is probably going to even shrink now with all the vast working triples cannot be healthy and working 24 to 48 hours. But, hopefully no one has deceased because of that. But let's talk about that. That's 16 years less than the average person for corrections. And on top of that, 27% suffer from PTSD, which was not always recognized by the state of New York. And I can attest to that for various people that I've tried to help, that it suffer from mental health. And we've had shows specifically devoted for correction officer and law enforcement mental health, and we will continue to do so. And anyone that needs help, I've always said, reach out and we will get you the resources that you need if you're struggling or in crisis. And also that the suicide rate for correction officer is that of double those of police officer. And we know the police officers are under amount of stress. We have much respect for the profession as well. And if the correction officer is double that of law or for police officers, what is that saying? Now think about that. It gets so bad and depression sets in so much that they decide that they want to take their own life at double the rate of a police officer. And you cannot decompress when you're working triples and mandated. And now you add the stress of family time that you're losing because of that. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. We all have life balance, want life balance. And when you can't have that, not only do you have the stress of the job, but now you have the stress of the home life too. And you see how that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And that cannot be healthy. So that coupled, now you get into what Mr. Larigo was saying on the WBEN 930 show, is now all of a sudden you have health insurance cancellation. So New York State, in its infinite wisdom, because of the strike by officers, decides that they're going to get their pound of flesh. So instead of the rules that are laid out by the New York State Taylor law, and they are heavy. I mean, there's a penalty for striking for correction officers or any public employee. And we have seen that the Buffalo Teachers Union, there have been other public employment strikes. And, this isn't the first one, but now it is a new record. And we'll get into that too, and the how that affects the competency of the New York State governor. But the health insurance cancellation. So the knee-jerk reaction is we're going to come after you. So they cancel with this new wild wizard rule of, they're going to come after you for gross misconduct. And that's the caveat word that they use for canceling everybody's health insurance. Now, Mr. Larigo states, his words against not mine, that nowhere in the Taylor law does it mention cancellation. And mind you, it's not just cancellation of the health insurance. They're telling you cannot even have COBRA, which is, to me, the last I knew, that was also a law by the federal government that you were able to 18 months when you were separated from employment, that you would pay for your health insurance, but it was still available to you. But New York State, no, we're not even going to allow that. And we're going to get into some other illegalities in a minute that New York State has done. So the violation of the Taylor law, yeah, you have 2-for-1 penalties, but New York State kicks you back and says not only are you going to, you have the possibility of fines for the alleged strike, but we're also going to cancel health insurance. Now, just think what that does to people. Is that an employer that people want to work for? And we'll get into that in a minute, and the whole health insurance issue, because I just don't see how that is healthy. And not only did they take health insurance away from those people that were alleged strikers, but they also took it away from other people that were on strike, so that were out for medical reasons. I can't see how that is legal, and we'll get into that in a second as well. But Mr. Lorigo goes on to say that what the New York State has done to these officers and employees that are out, and sergeants, what have you, that are out on the strike line and going into the fighting for their rights, I'll say, is that amounts to a constitutional violation, his words, not mine, of cruel and unusual punishment. Now, the U.S. Constitution goes in great detail on what the amendments to the Constitution about cruel and unusual punishment. But do you see a pattern here? It doesn't matter what is legal, not legal, what people are doing. New York State will do what it damn pleases, and you have to follow suit. So if you break the law, you're punished and fined, jailed, what have you. But if New York State does it, it's fine. It's okay. It's coming from the governor. It's great. You know, we have good people out there, good people to who. And we'll get into the portion of that, because even before they started the cancellation of the, do I have it here? Of the cancellation of I do not have it here, of the policies, there was a memo that was authored by Darren Ayotte, fresh into a day, that anybody that was out on FMLA, workers' comp, what have you, would be ordered back. And if not, they'd be giving AWOLs, a legal order. Those people that he subsequently put it in writing and gave orders to, I also believe that they are also in violation. And New York's federal law does state that people that are giving those orders can be held liable. So I don't know all the ammunition that law reads, but I did take snippets of it, and I'm sure that that'll be fought. And obviously, it's being fought on many fronts now, and we'll get to the timeline and what the union's doing and what other people are doing. So now we got the rally, which I played. We saw the words of the attorney Ralph Arrigo. So Mr. Arrigo, again, watched it on WBEN. He gets in there, and I want to stress that everybody that's able to make it in the Western New York area, or even if you're coming out, to be at the courthouse at 11 a.m. on Tuesday in downtown Buffalo at 92 Franklin, and attend that hearing and see the fight that he's amassing against the state. So now we have the rally. You saw the tremendous support that the community has given. So I don't know how the governor can say anymore that, you know, if I'm a politician and I'm seeing the amount of support that's given by businesses, that's given by the communities, that's given by the families, all these people are a voting bloc. They're all people that are constituents of the governor. So if all these people are supporting the correction officers' strike, how are you not listening and taking the heed of what they're saying? And basically threat after threat, and we'll get into that in a minute, with the kind of a love fest that the Commissioner Marticello and Homeland Security Bray got into. I believe it was Spectrum, if I'm not mistaken, their recent video that many people have commented that was more like a schoolgirl and school guy crush than it was a serious talk about the strikers and getting back. But we'll get to that in a minute. So since the strike has gone on, there's been much talk, and the thing that's unique about this strike, and obviously the last strike, just for record, was 1979 in New York State. And in 1979, they did very well with participation. It was a 16-day strike. Uh, they didn't have the ability to communicate through social media. They didn't have the ability to do Zoom meetings. They didn't have all the stuff that's readily available today. And I like to call this strike, good, bad, or indifferent, the Facebook strike of 2025, because a lot of this, what you're reading, I'm blocked on Facebook now, but if anybody that had, we'll get to that in a minute too, but if you get to a lot of stuff that was happening, it was done communication wise, rally information, and I won't get into the other stuff, but sometimes too much, but they were, getting the message out. They didn't have that in 1979 to say we're doing this at the Capitol steps or we're doing that. Other people paid attention and they jump into the fray because they said that, hey, we haven't heard from other players. So, you had Michael Sussman, who got involved, wrote letters to the mediators, another attorney from Orange County wrote letters to the mediator. Then in turn, after that, after hearing from his people that wanted representation or what have you, they also contacted him and said, hey, will you fight for us? And then he wrote again to the mediator, he wrote to the commissioner, he wrote to the governor saying that, there's all these people and all these factions, all these attorneys that are involved now with no real, a leader. But they're all fighting. If you listen to, doesn't matter if it's up north, if it's down south, if it's out west, if it's, the Mid Hudson area, or if it's Albany itself, part of the Mid Hudson, or what have you, they're all, the message is all the same. Everybody's saying the exact same things. We want to be safe. It's safe working conditions. And that brings me to the next point, because this actually was a letter Senator George Borrell had on his website. So, Senator, I apologize for stealing your letter, but it is public, and this kind of gets to the point and the frustration of what is going out there by the average correction officer, and the frustration and the amount of people that have resigned since this strike has ensued is astronomical. And also, as anybody goes to the website, and that's the workinginhell.com, you can see where I have actually foiled information from docs. Some of I've got, most I have not. But you can see the resignations and retirements were already at a steady increase. Now this has to blown it away. The people are just saying, "The hell with you! I'm not coming back to work ever." Some may try, but on the most part, the resignations is staggering. So let's get into this resignation here. This letter, let me blow it up so everyone can see it. And it's got superintendent, that's blank. We'll leave out the names. And for those that are on the audio only portion of the podcast, I'll read this in its entirety. And it says, superintendent, please accept this letter of my formal resignation from my position as correction officer for New York State, effective 14 days from today's date. I wish to have any remaining accruals paid in a lump sum. I regret to inform you of my resignation due to the failure of leadership and direction of duty by so-called leaders, quote unquote, in docs, and the policies and procedures implemented by this department, in parentheses, HALT, that have made my job unsafe and impossible. Because of this, it is taking an adverse toll on my physical and mental health. Think about that, because that's key. And everybody is saying the same thing. And we just talked about that by the professor a few minutes ago. Has taken an adverse toll on my physical and mental health. There is no such thing as work balance or days off anymore, and my family is suffering because of it. Good point. When I began working for this department in 2015, I was able to safely perform my duties for the most part, with incidents of violence against officers almost unheard of, even in maximum security setting. I was able to take vacations and have a steady schedule. Correction officers still had authority and were able to maintain safe facilities in a firm, fair, and consistent manner. Fast forward to present time, assaults on staff are at an all-time high, even in a shock incarceration facility, a place that is supposed to provide a second chance to inmates. It seems like every day there is an incident of violence towards staff. Inmate on inmate assaults, aggravated harassment, and exposures to unknown substances, either in the compound or Building 29 S Block. I can no longer watch my fellow officers that are also friends be assaulted daily by not only inmates, but the state of New York and your administration. Wow. I have witnessed officers being assaulted at Lakeview to the point that they are no longer able to work another day in their life. Wow, that's sad. The lack of care and concern by you and your administration, in my eyes, has cut off what was left of the shock program at the knees and essentially turned Lakeview into a general population medium with physical training and a pinch of military bearing. I used to, excuse me, let me reread that. I used to be passionate when I came to work and being a strong proponent of the shock program. My passion was working the network portion of the program. When we held the inmates on our dorms, to the highest standard to promote success, not only in the shock program, but upon release. This can be shown by multiple letters our F2 team has received from released inmates forwarded by counselors telling the success stories after release because our dorm staff team effort on all 3 shifts and the hard work we put in. I have had a chance to work and learn from the best drill instructors and officers in the state. Some retired, some resigned, and some are still working. Some promoted to supervisors, some unfortunately that are no longer with us, most likely because of on-the-job stress. I do not take this decision lightly, but for my own health and fear of retaliation from your administration and the state of New York is the only option I am left with. Wow, I'm just baffled. And the state of New York is negligent regarding providing a safe work environment. And it is an absolute disgrace to the public servants that took the oath to protect, serve, and have made facility operations work for years. It proves to me that this state and our supervisors do not care about its staff and our well being. We are only a number. I have never felt such an amount of betrayal as I do right now writing this letter. In conclusion, I strongly encourage the so-called leaders, quote unquote, of this department, you and your administration, and the security supervisors at Lakeview and facilities all across the state to look up the definition of leader and look at yourselves in the mirror and evaluate your life's decisions and how you treat your subordinates. This department and facility need true leaders, not managers, people that are not afraid to jump into the trenches and do the jobs themselves and lead by example. The facility and department need leaders that aren't afraid to stand up for what's morally right and back up the frontline staff, something I have been searching for about 10 years, but have found few and far between. I wish you well in trying to find replacements for all the seasoned and experienced staff you are losing and going to lose that decided walk away from this career was a better life option. Sincerely, X. So look at that. And I also did work at one time, and I do not know the officer that wrote this. I do not believe, because I do not even know who wrote it. But just think about that for a second. They're saying that we want to resign because that's the safer choice. And having heard this sentiment over and over, and facility administrations not standing up for the officers, and many facilities feel that way because very few management teams at local facilities, the officers believe, are going to Albany saying that, hey, stand up for us because we can no longer take it anymore. And the superintendents and those underneath in the management teams often feel like they cannot speak up for the fear of losing their own jobs and telling Albany the truth. And that was just also on, I believe, one of the Elmira stations yesterday when they had a retired superintendent from Elmira speaking about the grave conditions and how much the department has changed. So that letter speaks truth to fact right there. That is how just about every single officer is feeling. They don't trust Albany. They don't trust their facility administrations. They don't feel anybody has their back. And it's not safe. Bingo. That's everybody is saying the exact same thing. And having worked there in the or the shock program, has been watered down so much. We all know that the shock program is a foremost shell of itself from when it first came. But even there, which was always, I'm not going to say an easier place to work because it was a different type of program. But even there, how much shock or effectiveness and ready for return to society is that having an effect when it's becoming a place for violence and there's no stopping that? And we all know, we talked about the last podcast, I keep repeating this over and over, when there are no consequences, the actions or the bad actions are just going to keep continuing. And that's basically the crux of this. And everybody keeps talking about HALT and the dangers and the bad stuff that happens because of the HALT bill and HALT legislation, and the naysayers that are out there saying that, well, it's too soon to tell, or the statistics don't prove it, or it's not implemented correctly. It's like, even if any portion of that is true, can you imagine that getting any better when there's no penalties for bad behavior? And it's really that this letter speaks to another point, and we'll get to this in a minute, but also it was brought up on Mr. Larigo when he was talking about it. There's no penalties anymore. So when all the rights, and I'm not saying that the inmates don't have rights, and I'm not saying that at all. Obviously they do. There should be rights for everyone. But what they're saying, and this letter speaks volumes about it, is when the inmate rights supersede those of the employees, that's a problem. And that's what brought us to the people walking out of every single correctional facility in New York State. And people are still refusing to recognize that. I just saw something on last night's news. There's still no appetite to modify or change HALT. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what basically that it was. And I don't know if you need a piano to come in New York City to drop on people's heads before they start taking it seriously and understanding. I really don't know what really needs to be had other than those people, every single person that voted yes for HALT. Then you put on a uniform and go to a facility, and we'll see you in 7 days. That's the only way that it's going to get through to people, because common sense is no longer common sense in New York. It's just not. So I don't even know where we go from there as far as that goes. But that resignation letter hits home. And, and another thing that brought up in that resignation is the exposures. And I touched on that a few minutes ago. Now we have not only the correction officers and inmates and nursing staff that have been suffering these exposures, going out on ambulance and then leaving the facility because they can no longer take it, which another incident just happened. Again, we had one that happened at Fishkill, where the nurse and the officer earlier in the day were exposed, taken out by ambulance. And also now we have two National Guardsmen, or a couple National Guardsmen that had also suffered. Now, will we actually hear something now? Because it's happening not just to correction officers behind the walls. So it's actually happening to the National Guard. Are they going to speak? Are they allowed to say what's going on now that they've been exposed to something? So that's unique. Keep an eye on that. And obviously they went out also by ambulance too. So let's get back onto what was talked about earlier with the striking officers. We heard the resignations are also coming. The striking officers are out on the line, and we can keep talking about the back and forth that's going on between the union, the strikers, the state, and the department. But the health insurance aspect keeps coming up. And the Times Union reported yesterday that the officer had 17 years on a job. They were out on approved sick leave. So remember that. They're not striking. They're out on approved sick leave. And they approved sick leave for a medical condition, and now has no health insurance that they had a planned surgery for. And because their health insurance was canceled, that health issue that they needed surgery for had to be canceled because they no longer had insurance. That was reported by the Times Union. So think about that. How illegal is that? If that would have been any other employer, which Kathy Hochul was just speaking about earlier this week about how you're canceling, firing people from the federal government and they're losing this, but yet you do this to your own employees. And now you have somebody that's not even a striker that has approved. I thought that was illegal. That used to be something New York State would fight, but it seems now they're championed to take away health care from people that don't deserve to have their health care taken away. Baffling. I just, it's hypocritical, and it's a hypocrite. Let's think about that. That's a hypocrite. You can go out and preach. We, come to us. We love abortions. Come to us. We're the fighters. We champion healthcare. But then you take it away from your health. Then you take it away from your own employees. Is that a hypocrite, or is that a champion? I call it hypocrite. So now we get into the other one, and this was put up, I believe, the FMLA story, and that was on CBS 6 of Albany, if I'm not mistaken. This was a workers' comp injury, as reported by CBS 6, where the officer was into work to bring in documentation on a Saturday. So they were retained there for whatever reasons. They never were out. The mother or mother-in-law, I can't remember the story exactly, but the mother-in-law or whoever was waiting for them dropped them off to bring in the medical documentation that they asked for, but wasn't let out of the facility. So they wouldn't let them out. So in the meantime, their mother-in-law, whoever it was, is waiting for them outside. Like, what is going on here? So we fast forward to that Monday, I believe it was, and then there was an incident. I believe this was CBS 6 reported Kiksaki. I just want to make sure I got the facts right, because this came directly out of a news story from them. And then the fight that happened in the yard, the officer was injured, probably for the same injury that they were out on workers' comp for, and then taken out and had to go to, I believe it was the hospital, Albany Med, I'm assuming. So think about that. So they canceled their workers' comp, don't know how that is, orders that person back to work, and now there's a melee or a situation in the yard at Kiksaki, and they get hurt. Is not New York State responsible for that? How is that even legal and possible? Is that not just crazy? Because if that was an employer in New York State, that would have made the news and been all over the place, that, illegal actions by the employer, we have to do something. Everybody would be jumping in and trying to say that they were taking the rights away from their employees. But because New York State, the employer, is doing it, it's okay. You don't hear anything. I just can't wrap my head around it. And then we have another incident where the officer was out on FMLA. They had FMLA mostly because of lack of, I think most people are out on family medical leave because they're not getting proper sleep and taking care of their body and stress. So they're out for sleep and deprivation and stress, but for whatever reasons, they're out with a legit medical documentation. And people have had the FMLA canceled. That just baffles me. And ordered to go back to work. And but I won't get into all the particulars of somebody that happened to. And they gave me a whole story of it step by step, and it's just appalling about how the FMLA was just taking away from them. That I don't know how that is even possible. The last time I thought Family Medical Leave Act was a federal law, and that superseded somebody in personnel or somebody at a facility saying you have to come into work today. All your leave has been canceled. I don't know how that's a legal order, and people scared coming in and then ordered in. I can't wrap my head around it. So that goes back to the cruel and unusual punishment that I believe that Mr. Larigo was talking about, and when I first opened up the podcast segment. When he's saying that it's a constitutional right now. And I believe there's a lot of constitutionality illegalities that are going on by New York State and this governor. And if the governor didn't know about it, and Docs is just taking upon themselves, which I'm sure in a lot of these cases they do, that still falls on her. We've showed other memos, the 70 is the new 100 that started the strike by the Commissioner Marticello. That was the fuel and that made everything explode to begin with. You're going to make a vast unsafe situation even more so. And, they keep coming up with these crazy things. So they're violating law after law after law. and that's okay. And that's how we got here. But it just shows the pattern of abuse by New York State and the abuse that it has and the authority it has over its employees, and they just don't care. You could say that they're doing it, but we have to do it because strike, and we have to get people back to work. Hogwash. If you don't have the right to do it under normal circumstances, you don't have the right to do it in a crisis situation. When can you just pick up? If the correction officers ever did that, they'd be in trouble, and sometimes are, because of the cruelty that's just unsets. I don't get it. I really don't get it. It's okay for New York State to be a cruel employer, but if it happens in the private sector, New York State comes out and vastly condones it. It's really just a bunch of horse dung, to be nice. And then we've had the different. We saw since the last time we spoke, the people were on strike, but now since then we've had a mediation. So we had mediation. Mediator came out with the consent award that was obviously rejected by the strikers. So the union, the state, the union attorneys, all came out with this. They said, here's the consent award, it's up to you. And here it is. So, and that was vastly rejected. So the strikers reject that consent award. So then what? That's a good question, because we didn't hear from anybody. Nobody was talking. Didn't hear anything other than the state saying, that's the consent award. That's it. Do what you have to do. Let's get back to work. And obviously, I don't know if people didn't hear them or if people were in a coma for 8 days. And then all of a sudden, we fast forward 8 days, and then there's a couple letters in between by attorneys. There's members take it upon themselves to come up with some plans to get back to work. And that's right there tells you something. When the members take it upon themselves to start negotiating, that is what is key. Meaning to me that, hey, they want to get back to work. They don't agree out there on the strike line. They're trying to do everything and move heaven and earth to try to get back to work. But they wanted to be able to go back to work safely. Not going to walk back in, and especially with all these resignations going on, they're not going to walk back in and say that it's okay to walk back into a more unsafe environment. You have people, the governor keeps wanting, and the commissioner too, keeps using the National Guard like, that's the end all be all. Oh, we have the National Guard. It's like, okay, you have the National Guard. Okay, now what? Are they trained? As we've seen from some of the things that have happened in the last 3 weeks, no, they're not trained. I'm not saying they're not good people, because obviously they are good people. But if they're not trained for the job, I don't see how that's beneficial and going to be beneficial if people want to go back to work, and they do want to go back and have shown that. So now all sides dig in. The union doesn't want that. The state doesn't want that. Everybody's having a hissy fit. So we have a press conference by the union. They have it in their headquarters. They put out a press release about all these things and how people are interfering, rightfully so. Of course, people are going to interfere. They want things to get done, and when they see it, whether it's real or perceived, they want things to start moving. And when they don't hear anything, yes, just like the strike, they want to take matters into their own hands. I get that. Not saying it's right or wrong, not for me to decide. I am not working, so I do not know what it's going to take for officers to go back in. Some of the things I've seen, again, Facebook strike of 2025, of what's out there on social media. Some of it is good, some of it is bad, unrealistic, but be that what it's may, they want to be safe. And I understand that. But I can't say what's good or not. I don't have a stake in it anymore. My health insurance is still continuing. My surgeries are still scheduled. My paycheck still came. My paycheck is still coming next month. So it's not fair for me to say what's right for them and what's not. And I never will. I'm not going to speak when I can't lead by an example. And I've said that many times. But something is off, because the workers are showing that, hey, I want to get back to work. They want to. As bad as New York State has treated them, they're saying, I still want to go back and work for this miserable employer. Let that sink in, But then after the union does their press conference, there's things that happen, blah, blah, blah. Now all of a sudden, the Dan Marticello III and Department of Homeland Security Bray have this dual hand-holding ceremony on Spectrum News, I believe. And if it wasn't Spectrum, then I apologize. But they do a press conference. So they're up there pleading, making the same threat that they made on day one. So think about that for a minute. Not saying that the threat is real or not real, but the same threat they made on day one is now they're making on day 17. So do you think that that loses some effectiveness when you keep saying that, you better do this, you better do that, or this, but it doesn't happen. And then now all of a sudden the next day, you better come back to work or blah, blah, blah. And we're doing this and you're getting fined. And I'm sure that there are things. I'm not saying that they're bluffing, but what they're tired of hearing it. And when you treat them like kids and they're up there basically, somebody, I didn't realize it that way. It says, look at them. They look like school kids, poking and grabbing each other like they're having a good time up there during this press conference. But the thing that really irked a lot of people was listen to the tone. And you keep having the messenger being the commissioner. That's very unique because the messenger hasn't been the governor or anybody from the governor's office. It's always the commissioner. And now we have apologize, Miss Bray, because I don't know her first name. So now you have Miss Bray and Mr. Marticello doing these press conferences. So that's kind of unique because you have a situation where there's already a vote of no confidence. The commissioner caused the strike with his new 70 is the new 100. And anybody that he talks to over and over again has already told you to basically go pound salt. So they don't like the commissioner. He's probably the most hated man in corrections because that's what I've been told over and over. So you have the most hated man in corrections keep being the messenger. I just don't see how that's effective either. But yet anything that comes out, you have him. And the thing that's unique is that the union is saying that they don't condone the strike, and I'm sure that they don't, and that's been proven. And then you have the state coming out and saying that, we're talking directly to the membership. And now we fast forward to where the union files or claims that they're filing a lawsuit, which I believe, I don't know if they did it or not. So that's why I say claims, and I'm not throwing the union under the bus by any means, but it's unique because the state had already told you that they are working directly with the employees. You had state operations, Catherine Garcia. So if you were going to file suit about interference in direct dealing with the members, why wasn't it done then? In the press conference with Kathy Hochul, you had state operations, the early days of the strike, coming out and saying that we have our local facility superintendents going out and dealing with those frontline workers to see what it's going to take and negotiating with them to see what it's going to take to get them back to work. So they didn't hide from that. That wasn't a smoke screen. That happened. The members went on national TV or TV. I don't know if it's national, but went on TV and told you these things. So on TV, the state operations state of operations director Catherine Garcia tells you that she's dealing with it. You find out from the membership that she is. Where was the lawsuit then? Because it happened. And then you have Marticello who goes out, says that, I'm going and visiting each facility and I'm dealing with the frontline members to see what it's going to take to get to work. He didn't say I'm taking their opinions and going back to the union with them. He said he was directly going to talk to them. So where's the spiel there? It should have been done immediately. And I don't understand why it wasn't. They told you that they were direct dealing with the membership. And when you have too many cooks, and there are definitely too many cooks, but nobody's hearing anything. I don't understand that. So, everything that I say, take with a grain of salt. I'm not on the front lines. And I'm sure that the union has brought up this to both Doc's and the governor's office many times. And I'm sure they're vastly educated in what the officers want. Because like I said earlier, you need a piano to drop on you to not understand that they don't feel safe. And that's been the argument all along, whether it's been to the union, whether it's been directly to Doc's, whether it was the no confidence vote and telling you why, whether it was all the online petitions that went directly to Governor Hochul's office that said it, whether it was the letter that we spoke of last podcast from all the representatives Congress delegation sending a letter to Governor Hochul saying that the HALT Act isn't working and how unsafe it is and how there's no discipline. So, I mean, it didn't, nobody should be shocked. Nobody, including the governor, including the commissioner, including Homeland Security. So when they got up there with this whatever press conference that they did, I don't think that that was well received. And one of the quotes I put in, it said, "Went over like a lead balloon." Yeah, people are frustrated. Are people going back to work? I don't know, but they're frustrated and they want to go back to work, and that's the key. And that seems what's getting lost, even in these dire consequences and how bad those employers have been treating them. The officers, the men and women that are working in these horrible conditions are still saying, make it safe for us. We want to go back to work. Now, I can't say whether I would do that or not do that because I'm fortunate that I got out. And as every other person that has said, including our past superintendent of Elmira, he left because he could see the direction the department was going. I'd still be working today. I'm sure Docs doesn't want to hear that, but I would still be working today if the conditions didn't deteriorate as bad as they did, and they're still not half as bad as they are today in 2025. So that's telling you something. And I saw how bad it was then and said, I can't do it. So for these people to put up with it that have been working since the time that I retired to now, kudos and much respect to you, because I couldn't do it. And I said, and I'll be the first one to say it, I left because of it. That was the only reason that I retired. I still am, at least I think I'm still young enough that I think that I could work, but I couldn't anymore. I couldn't do it mentally. I couldn't do it stress. I just couldn't do it. And we saw what stress does to the body. And we know that we are 16 years, as sad as that is, because that means I don't have much time left on this earth, because we're talking about 16 years less than the average. Your life expectancy, let that sink in. Life expectancy of correction officers and sergeants and lieutenants are that 16 years less than those in the average population. That just blows me away. And that's the suicide rate. It breaks my heart. And then we all know the divorce rate and everything else is much higher. Those statistics, we've known for all along. But hearing that again with the 16 years, I guess it's that just really, really hit home. So just wanted to kind of get to where we are. We didn't get through everything that I wanted to get through for this hour of podcast, probably because some of this stuff is just hurting me so bad, and I'm not effectuated by it, by those people that have families and want to get back to work and have no health coverage. And and what do? You're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because you're like, do I go back to work and have an injury? Because some did. Right? Some just went back to work and now they had an injury, and I'm sure they're second guessing themselves. If I would have stayed on the line, would have I been okay? It's just not safe, and New York State can't get it through its thick voting block, I'll say, and say that, hey, you know what? Maybe we should look at this. Maybe we should take a hard look at HALT, and maybe we should look and see if we can't do something to make it just a little bit safer. Maybe we should have outside entities with a little more teeth, that when we make a PESH complaint, that actually somebody listens and does something about it. It's not just written on a piece of paper. Okay, yeah, there's smoking here, but we really don't know what's going on. But yet 22 people left in an ambulance that month. I mean, come on. I don't think that it's too much to ask all sides. And I said this at the end of the last podcast, that all sides, sit in a room, you don't come out until you fix it. This is common sense. This isn't asking for, things that are unreachable. It really isn't. I don't know of another strike where people just said, hey, we're not out here striking for, does anybody want better pay and better benefits? Absolutely, everybody does, and they deserve it, no more so than the correction officer. But when they're saying, I just want to be safe, how do you argue with that? I want to go home in the same condition I came in. And as I opened up with that video where the officers are just getting viciously assaulted. Let that sink in. Let it sink in that in these medium facilities, there are no place to put these inmates because there's no cells. They're in a dormitory. They're in cubicles. They're not locked away. So there's no way when they misbehave, you can just go in there and say, okay, Mister, you've been bad today. We're going to lock you. You can't do that, and the general public is just mind boggled when we tell them these stories, and that really needs to get out there. But again, I just want everybody to be safe no matter what the outcome is. I wish you much success. I wish you more support than ever. That's to the community and the general public. It seems that, have overwhelmingly took the side of the correction officer. I just wish the governor would and the corrections would have a little more emphasis on your safety. And we've seen memos. We didn't get to them all, but we've seen memos. It's just weird that all these memos that the union has been asking for the last year are mysteriously coming down and sprinkled down from the commissioner's desk. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, oh, really? You want the visitors to go through scanners? Well, I think the union's only been asking that for 3 years now. What? Some of this stuff you just heard at the union executive meeting that you were at, Mr. Commissioner. I didn't see any memos coming out then. The only memo that you put out was 70 is to do 100. The problem, right? I agree. So again, I will end there. I wish you much success. I hope that you get the outcome that you desire, because I don't know what that outcome is that's acceptable to you. And obviously everybody has a different opinion, but I do wish you much success. All the lawsuits that are out there, I hope that those come to fruition and you win each and every one, because you deserve that. To those that are working on the line, and do not let outside influences gauge your direction. Only you know what's good or not good for you, and hopefully more people than not have your back, and eventually maybe this governor will turn around and have your back. So with that, we're going to end this podcast, episode 19. I want to thank everybody for listening, and if you liked what you heard, give it down there, give it the thumbs up. And again, as I close every podcast with, be kind to the person or persons next to you, because you may not know exactly what they're going through. And thank you, everyone. Again, it's Vinny Blasio, Working in Hell. Thanks again. Talk to you later.
You've been listening to the Working in Hell podcast with Vinny Blasio. Find this podcast on any of your favorite platforms like Audible, iHeart, and Spotify. And be sure to check out www.workinginhell.com for more information and important links. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.